I'm Heather Hansen, and I know you are so excited for a trial to start this afternoon, and so are we. We expect that we will have this case coming out of California, so they're on Pacific time any minute. But before we do, I wanted to make sure that we took the time while we have Ken here. Welcome, Ken. I know that you've been here talking to Jesse.
Happy New Year, Heather.
Happy New Year to you, too. I'm really excited to talk to you about this case of James Damore, who is that infamous Google employee who was fired after putting out this long memo, I think it was a 10-page memo, on his thoughts about Google's culture and their diversity policies and all of that. Now, he put out that memo on an internal sort of blackboard that they use to talk to one another in July. And then it became public in August, and there was all kinds of talk about it. We talked about it here at Law&Crime. And then he was fired. As I expected, he has now filed a lawsuit, but it's an interesting lawsuit. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, he's not just going after Google himself. He filed a class action lawsuit, and he would presumably be the lead plaintiff in this lawsuit. Now, it's a little bit weird because typically class actions, especially in discrimination cases, they're not typically filed on behalf of white men.
Right, right.
But you do have the right. You are not to be discriminated. It is protected class of gender and race.
So gender would be male and race would be Caucasian.
Yes.
And that's what they're claiming the discrimination was based upon.
It's a little interesting because if you look at Google as a whole, overall, 69% of their employees are male, 56% of which are white. And if you look at their leadership, it's 75% male, 68% white. So it's a bit of a stretch to say that Google is, fostering a culture that doesn't engender success to the white man.
Yeah, this is really about political ideology, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
But in California, that political ideology is also arguably protected.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Typically, your viewpoint, when it comes to expressing your viewpoint with regards to private employment, it's not protected.
Right.
We all have a First Amendment right, which people get a little bit confused. The First Amendment means the government can't create laws that stymie free speech, especially political speech. It's the most protected when you look at the case law. But this is a private employer. Just like a radio station or a newspaper or a magazine, they have the right to sort of push whatever viewpoint they want and curtail other competing viewpoints.
Right.
Now, California has a law that also protects speech in the context of private employment.
Which is interesting because California is known as being a pretty liberal state.
Yeah, they didn't see this one coming, all right?
Yeah, it was probably developed to protect some of other types of speech other than conservative, sort of anti-woman, pro-white men speech.
They were thinking we have to make the workplace safe for feminists.
That's right.
Not misogynists.
However, listen, you and I have a little bit difference of opinion here because I do feel, we've talked about this here at Law&Crime, I do feel as though his memo was opening up a conversation. And I feel as though he had some strong points in that memo that are worth talking about.
Well, look, he did have some strong points that were worth talking about in the memo. Some of the diversity tactics, I believe that people should be promoted based on merit.
Yes.
I really firmly believe in merit-based promotion. And look, maybe he was drawing some attention. He thought that some of the promotions were not based on merit. They might have been based on race and gender. The statistics, when you look at it, as we said before, don't really bear that out. But look, he started a conversation. I don't know if it's a conversation he should have started because even though he made some good points in that memo, some pretty bad points. He said that women were more prone to being neurotic. He should spend some time with me and he might find the opposite is true.
But the thing is, as a woman, it's hard for me to not take issue with that. At the same time, he used, that memo had specific citations to psychological studies that supported his positions. And so while I might say, the majority of women who work at Google may not be prone to being neurotic, and you sort of have to parse that out, I also think it's worth talking about because men and women are different.
Yeah, of course.
So for him to have raised these issues, but don't you think that the fact that he raised the issues, wrote the memo, it was out there without him being fired, and he only got fired when it became public, is going to be a little bit of a problem for Google?
If he's really that upset about women being promoted over men at Google, he should take a look at the fact that 3/4 of Google's employees are male.
Right.
It sounds like he's working out some deeper issues.
Well, and the other thing that I think is going to be an interesting defense for Google is they're also facing a lawsuit from women saying that there's gender disparity in pay.
Which I think that lawsuit probably has more merits because the statistics bear it out more. It seems more based when, on the facts. Now look, he's going to go forward with this class action lawsuit. It's going to be a bit of a hurdle because for a class, when you file the lawsuit, the class has to be certified. Right. He has to show that he is, an adequate representative of the class, white male, okay, he's got that, and that this class is very numerous. I don't know that you're going to find a numerous amount of white men that were discriminated against by Google. Seems a bit of a stretch. He's also going to have to prove that there was a commonality, question of law, a common question of law. I think he's got that. The question is Google discriminating on the basis of race and gender, specifically towards white men, and in the case of California's law, with conservative political viewpoints. But I just don't see that this class is going to be so typical. I don't think that each person is damaged in the same way. There's a variety of disparities in salaries, I would assume, in an organization that large, and I just think it's gonna be real tough.
Yeah, it's definitely a situation that is going to be interesting and one to watch. Their attorney, the attorney who has filed on behalf of, because it's not just Demore, it's also, there's another gentleman, and I don't have his name written down here, who's part of the class, who claims that he was fired, Gudeman, G-U-D-E-M-A-N. He claims that he was fired because he said something to a Muslim coworker about having been to Pakistan. Now, it's going to be difficult for both of these gentlemen to establish, as you said, damages, to establish that their situations are similar enough to be part of a class. I do think Demore has a better argument for retaliation, to say I was fired because I put this memo out there. And I think that that's where he should be focused, rather than sort of making this big broad statement and trying to make it turn this into a political conversation.
Well, first of all, I totally agree with you. If he had filed an individual lawsuit on the basis of retaliation for his memo, of course, no question, and I think Google would probably settle that relatively quickly. But by doing this class action lawsuit, two things concern me. Number one, in class action lawsuits, the amount of damages is amplified considerably, and companies are very afraid of class action lawsuits. So this guy, I think, to a certain extent, is doing this for publicity, because the class action generates way more publicity, because it's not going to settle quickly. And number two, I wonder if it's going to undermine the attorneys that favor class action lawsuits, because there's been a movement in this country for decades now to reform class action lawsuits, to prevent them, to curtail them, to try and prevent them from going forward. Because big corporate interests, they lose a lot of money on these lawsuits.
Well, and that's the other thing that the attorney said. But before I say that, I do want to let the audience know we are going to go live to the trial the minute that it's live and available for us to throw to. So I know some of you are anxiously waiting and wondering whether you're missing anything. We will bring you there the minute that it is live and that trial is going on, and we're able to take you there. In the meantime, though, to your point, Ken, this attorney specifically said that this is a shot across the bow to other companies in Silicon Valley. So it's almost like, and she's known as a conservative lawyer who has these conservative views, it's almost like she wants to take on Silicon Valley for being a liberal or a liberal-leaning area of business. Do you think that lawsuits are the way to do that?
Lawsuits can be, a progenitor of change and affect policy, and it might. It's interesting to do it in Silicon Valley.
I have to interrupt you, Ken, because we've been waiting for a trial to start. So as soon as it started, we have to throw it there. We are going live to the courtroom in California. We'll be back during the next break, and hopefully Ken will still be here with me. Thank you.